Hello and welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch. It is sponsored by Massa's Restaurants in St. Louis. There's 5 locations and you can find them at stlmasses.com. If you're driving through St. Louis, you watch this interview and you go, hey, I enjoyed the interview, Brad, and now I want to have some pasta. That's what you do. Go to stlmasses.com and figure out where you're going and look at that menu. But today, very excited as I have got somebody that I see every Sunday. I follow him on Facebook. I see him doing his thing, and I said, I wonder if Bill Kinison would actually come on my podcast and share some Sam Kinnison stories, some Bill Kinison stories, some family stories. And look at that, there he is, looking handsome as ever. It's Bill Kinison. Hello, Bill.
Even in person, man.
Good to
the
see.
Makeup people did a really great job.
Good. It's really good to see you, and I really do appreciate you coming on. I have to tell you that. To do research, I always kind of go back and look at some videos, and I have not laughed more than I did while I did research for this interview, so I'm sure you'll understand why in a little bit. But tell us a little bit about what you're up to. Again, I see you on Facebook. I think, it's one of those things where I'm like, hey, you have mutual friends, so I go, I watch, and I see you doing your thing on Sunday mornings. Tell us a little bit about where you are, what you're doing, and spreading the word for everyone to hear, and anyone can go see you, I guess.
Well, we actually, it all started, I did the eulogy for Robin Williams service. And at the end of that service, I had people coming up, people that I knew and people I didn't know. And one was comedian Argus Hamilton, which I don't know if you're aware of him. He's an older person now, and I love reading his comedy on the internet every day. And anyway, he came up, and he's the son of a Baptist preacher in Oklahoma. And he came up and goes, Bill, you should be back in the ministry. And I thought, oh, that's awful nice, thank you. And then, different ones I didn't know come up and goes, man, you should be a preacher. Well, we owned a theater in Upland, California, 400-seat community theater that we did plays and concerts and different things in. And we rented it to a church on Sunday morning. And I got to thinking about it, kept thinking about it. And then I told my wife, Sherry, I said, if they ever leave, I would consider starting a church. And so they left. And so we opened a church. And we was there exactly 1 year and did great. Our first service, we had over 170 people. And but at the end of a year, it was just too tough, man. We had to, after a show on Saturday night, we had to tear down the set up for church on Sunday morning. And if we was doing a play, we had a 2:00 play on Sunday afternoon. We'd have to tear down the church stuff, put back up the set. And so after a year, I was like, I can't do this. And so, but we had a lot of people. And I thought, just to patronize them and don't feel like I just quit on them, we'll do a 30-minute thing on the internet. It'll peter out, and everybody go back to their life. And so that's what we did, except with the other direction. And now we run over 3,000 viewers that watch us. And it's not I think the name really says it. It's the gospel according to Kinnison. It's a gospel according to me. I'm probably one of the few preachers that will admit we all interpret the Bible according to us. And so I thought, why beat around the bush? This is how I see it. This is how I'm going to do it. You've watched it. And it's really more of a motivation, I think, and a life-changing success methods and techniques than it is preaching. And so that's what we do on Sunday morning. We've had great results, and a lot of people helped, and I'm happy doing it. And that's what we do.
Yeah, is the easiest way to find it just go to Facebook and search your name, right? Is that the easiest way, or is there a better way?
It's open to the public. You don't have to be my friend. You can go to Facebook, Bill Kinison, or Sherry Kinnison with a Y, either one of them. And you can watch it. And then we have a lot of people that share it. You also can watch it on YouTube once the program is over. They put it on YouTube, and you can watch actually not only this week's, but all of them. All of our programs, I think, are on there, and you can watch that way. And we've garnered a lot of attention. I mean, some of the things, probably the least percentage of groups that I have watching it is Christians, and especially hardcore. Sam and I was raised Pentecostal, so we danced and spoke in tongues and fell on the floor and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that they're not getting excited about the things that I say, but we have everything from everyone from atheists to Taoists. I still haven't figured out what that is yet, but we have several Taoists that watch us. We have Islamic, Buddhist, you name it, and LDS. Everyone watches us, and we usually get a very good response. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody that doesn't care for it, and I make it clear, I think, in my programs that this isn't for everybody. Mm-hmm. If you're super religious or you think you're super spiritual or anything, you're probably not going to enjoy my program. So I'm not up there. We don't ask for any money. Not up there to garner a bunch of followings. I just give what's in my heart and give it out.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's family business. You guys have done this in your family for so many years. But I am curious about the time where, obviously, famously, Sam was doing this first. This is what he was doing in the late 70s. And he comes to the family and he says, guys, I think I want to do stand-up comedy. So at that point, are you still preaching at that point? And just, this is sort of a watershed moment, I guess, for the whole family because, Sam goes off, he moves to LA, right? And starts working out of the Comedy Store and things start working. What was that time like for the family to see kind of someone leave the nest and kind of get out of the family business?
Well, what really brought it about was like you said, it was the family business. Our dad was a preacher. My mother thought she was a preacher. And so we was raised in that kind of an atmosphere. I hated church. I hated God. Didn't really like it. And I never planned on being a preacher. Went to college, had a great job. And my dad had never encouraged me ever, or any of us ever, to be in the ministry. And but he did tell me one time, I want you to go to college. I want you to get a career. And then if you're not happy, preach. So I thought, I'll be happy. Anything that I don't have to do with church, I'll be happy. Well, I don't know if he prophesied or what, but sure enough, I had a great job. I was a branch manager over 12 offices in Indianapolis. And I remember I'm washing my dishes and looking out the window one day and I'm going, I'm not happy. So I went back to Peoria, moved back in the church we were raised in, and I had a brother, Richard. That was really the star of our family. He was a walking miracle. He was born blind and severely mentally handicapped. At the age of 13, he couldn't count to 10. He couldn't spell his name. He couldn't dress himself. And he said an angel appeared to him and told him that healing was inside of him. And he laid hands, he said, on his head and on his eyes, and he could see. And he was 2 years older than I was. He ended up graduating from high school with me, caught up in the school system and graduated with me. And like Sam was a natural in comedy, Richard was a natural in the ministry. Ended up being the best evangelist I'd ever seen. Well, I come back and I asked Rich, I said, hey, you want to go in the ministry? And well, that was his dream. And so we started out in a little place. I remember our first speaking engagement was a little place in Cameron, Wisconsin, which had 240 people. And our fourth revival that we ever preached, we was running 3,000 a night. And hit right out of the gate, was extremely successful. Well, now Sam, he ran away from home at 14. And 2 years later, he actually heard Richard and I on a radio broadcast in a church in Oklahoma City. He was hitchhiking and a truck had picked him up. And guy was channel surfing. And so what Sam goes, wait a minute, go back. And so it was his brother. So he called me, Oklahoma City. We hadn't seen him in 2 years. Be honest with you, we didn't know if he's alive or dead. And so he joined up with us and decided he wanted to be a minister. But I think it was really more he was named after our dad, and he used to tell me it was like Julian Lennon, who ended up being a good friend, doing it for dear old dad. And I think that's really what it was. And he wasn't very good, to be honest with you. His weakness is that he didn't have a very good stage presence, which when you see him in comedy, that's unbelievable. You just can't imagine Sam being on any stage and not having a stage presence. But he felt like preaching was giving out information. And I used to tell him you have to do it in an entertaining way. And he just couldn't buy into that, or wouldn't. And so he got married. 2 years into the marriage, he caught her in an affair. They ended up in a divorce. And as Pentecostal preachers, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. You cannot preach and be divorced. They used to say, if you can't take care of your own house, you're not fit for the house of God. And so I was pastoring a large church in Rockford, Illinois. He came up there right after this happened, and he was as low and as devastated as I'd ever seen him. And he told me what happened. And so I told him, I said, well, Sam, I want you to forget that your brothers are preachers, your dad's a preacher, your friends are all preachers. Look down in your heart. Take some time, look down in your heart. Find out what you always wanted to do. Well, he took about 3 seconds and said, I always wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And so I said, well, set a date then. And after that date, you're never going to preach again. Because if you do, you'll keep going back to it. He did. He found out, which is kind of comical now, that there was a club or bar, actually, in Houston, Texas, that was going to teach you how to be a stand-up in a week. And so Sam went down to Houston, and I went down about 6 weeks after he'd been doing comedy, and he was a natural. One night, Rodney Dangerfield walked in and caught Sam's act, and when he came in with his entourage, I told the bartender, I said, I'll pay for whatever they want. And so he told Rodney. Rodney had me come over and sit by him at his table, but not knowing I'm connected with Sam at all. Sam's on stage. And he turns around to me and said, hey, this kid's an effing genius. Said he's going to make it big one day. I don't know how long it's going to take him. You're not too disciplined, but he's going to make it. And so I introduced Sam to him after the show was over, and they become fast friends. Rodney and I became very close friends. And it was Rodney 6 years later or 5 years later that gave him his break in L.A. and put him on the HBO Young Comedian special, which we both blew off. And even when we went, we thought, nothing's going to happen. We get a free trip to New York, and 6 minutes isn't going to change Sam's life, especially with the kind of comedy he was doing. And the first night, they did a run through before a live crowd, so the cameras could all set their angles and get all the sound and everything right. And Sam cleared the room. They walked out on him, everybody in there. Crew probably would have walked out if they weren't getting paid. He comes off the stage and he tells Rodney, he said, I can't get going in 6 minutes. Rodney says, tomorrow night you're going to kill, Sammy. I'm telling you, tomorrow night you'll kill. Tomorrow night came, Sam killed, and that was it.
That was my question. It's so great that you went. That was exactly where I was going, because this is okay. So I was 8 maybe when I saw this. My dad loved the Rodney Dangerfield. We got HBO probably in 1983. I remember my dad falling off his chair because no one had seen anything like this. But I think it's amazing that you said this, because my thought was, okay, you walk out of there. Do you guys say, all right, we've made it? But it sounds like you said, this is not going to work. No one's going to see it. But it really was. I mean, most comedians always talk about their time on Johnny Carson, the first time on Johnny Carson. Everyone says that from the early 80s, late 70s. But these Rodney Dangerfield specials made a lot of people as well, and it definitely made Sam Kinnison. So you guys, I mean, did it blow up right after that? Because I'll never forget it. I mean, it was amazing. And then is this when you start kind of managing and traveling, or where did your work with him come?
Actually, just before that, maybe that didn't air for probably 3 or 4 months. But what had happened was I was pastoring a large church, and I was getting ready for Sunday morning service. I was in the shower, and something in my heart, I think God just spoke in my heart and said, it's time for you to do something else. I had been flying out there. If Sam ever felt like he had something going, I would fly out and check it out. And if there was something, try to negotiate it, but there never was. He was just, that material back in that day wasn't going to make it, and Sam wasn't going to compromise. And I don't think Sam ever thought till he made it he was going to hit it. And but I remember I'm driving to church, and I'm thinking, well, I got to tell my wife. And I thought that's not going to be easy. This is her hometown. We got a great church, and we're loving it. We're living the life. We're young people, and so I remember driving and going, Sherry, today's going to be my last service as pastor. And I said, we'll still be here probably for a few weeks till we figure out what we're doing, but I'm not going to be pastoring after this morning. And I figured if you knew my wife was going to go, no, this isn't going to happen. We're staying here. We're pastoring this church. Instead, all she asked was, what are we going to do? And I go, well, Sam's has been wanting us to manage him full time. And we got enough money to last us a couple of years in California. So let's go out and try it. And so we went out, and this aired about, maybe 6 weeks after I got there. And when it aired, he automatically, that week I signed the week after him being on there, we signed a 4 special deal with HBO, a 4 record deal with Warner Brothers, 2 appearances on Johnny Carson. I don't know how many appearances, 4 or 5 appearances on David Letterman, 3 appearances on Saturday Night Live. This is all within a week after that 6 minutes. Now, I've been going out there and having agents and managers and stuff come and see him, and they would double over. And then when they get all through, I go, well, let's do some business. And they would go, we don't know what to do with him. Well, after seeing him 6 minutes on the HBO special, they all knew what to do with him. And we were off to the races for 6 years.
So what part at what point does he start kind of living the rock and roll lifestyle? Was that always, I mean, before, I guess, when he was doing his early days at the Comedy Store in the early 80s, he was probably into some things there. And how hard was it for you to watch this happen as you're kind of, with him at all times? And how hard do you, because what amazes me as I watch, you never see him not on when he's doing his appearances. There's people that you can, rock and roll stars who just slurring their words during songs. But Sam, I never saw have an issue when he was on. Maybe the Howard Stern show, which we'll talk about in a second. But what was it like for you to just have to kind of deal with it? Was it babysitting, or did you worry about what was happening? How did that work in the mid '80s when he was kind of doing? It's pretty well known he was a partier.
Yeah, I mean if TMZ would have been around back then, there probably wouldn't have been a career. I think our first thing is that Sam never had a drink till he was 25. And seeing him down in Houston using the language and everything that he did, I mean, we grew up in a house that if you said darn, you got smacked in the face. If you said gosh, shoot, any of those kind of things, that was way over the line. And seeing Sam up using the language and then his subject material and everything, I remember down in Houston, after watching him a few times, he goes, what do you think, brother? And I go, Sam, you don't have to use that language to be funny. And so this was the first time, but he said it to me many, many times afterwards. We're not in church, brother. We're not in church. And so he had an addictive personality. And Sam could never do anything in moderation. So whatever he did, he was all out. When you talk about his life, his rock and roll lifestyle, he never changed. That was him before he ever made it. I remember Johnny Carson asking that question. Said, what's the difference now that you've made it and before you made it? And Sam goes, well, I can afford to party now. He said, back then I had to depend on everybody else. Now I can afford to do it myself. And so him getting up and doing a show, it made it very difficult for me because I couldn't go, dude, look what it's doing to your show. Look what it's doing to your career. And whenever I did say that a few times, he goes, read the reviews. He could recover quicker than anybody I'd ever seen in my life. I made hundreds of dollars betting with the promoters and the crew members and stuff in the venues we played that he couldn't do the show. And so I'd go put up some money. And the trick was is if I could get him out there, they were going to get a great show because within 3 or 4 minutes, the adrenaline picked up and you seen him. So I couldn't tell him how bad it was affecting his career. I mean, the stories were true. You know, as I said on my program a few times when it comes up, stories about Sam was all true. You know, he did party like that. He did do those things. And I told him a few times, I said, man, I'd like to know what it's like to actually manage your career because all I do is babysit your ass and make sure he got on a plane. I actually went to rehab for 5 months. Taking a drug hit for him was probably the best thing to happen for both of us because when I got out, we had new rules. And the new rules was if you get on the plane, you get on the plane. I'm not gonna go around and babysit you and make sure you do this and that. I'll let you know what's going on, and it's up to you if you show up or not. And he did. And so that was it.
Yeah, well, and I mentioned the Stern appearances a few times. Were you with him at all these times? I mean, there's the one where he's asleep. They had to go call him, and tell me about just kind of those times because it was really you get the sense of Sam. Like I said, the Letterman show was 7 minutes. He had his act, and Dave was funny, and Carson. But here, these are hour-long interviews, and it's in the morning, so it's early. He's been up all night. Tell me a little bit about the times doing the Howard show, because I think that also helped him, too. I mean, he was a rock and roll comedian going on this rock and roll morning show.
Both of them. When he first went on Howard, I remember we flew a red eye for his first appearance, and Howard did not like stand-up comedians. And the reason is that they were never out of character. And so, he made that pretty clear on his program that, he wasn't crazy about stand-up comedians. Somehow, we got where we could go on Howard Stern. Well, at that time, he was only on 2 stations, and but he was still the king of media. And so I remember we were flying there and on a red night, flying all night, and I remember Sam really worried about it, going, dude, what am I supposed to do? He doesn't like comedians. He's the king of all media, everything else. What am I supposed to do? And so I go, well, Sam, if I was you, I'd go in and give it up to him right out of the gate. I'd tell him, you're the king. You're the king. And then I said, and just be you like you are everywhere else. Just be you. And, Sam, again, can't do anything in moderation. So the first time he walks into Howard's studio, he gets down on his knees and starts bowing. You're the king. You're the king. And that fed Howard's ego. And that's where it all started. Well, I hated New York. Not because of New York. I hated New York because it was not a good place for Sam. Bars are open all night long. It was just a trouble place for Sam. And then we'd always have to do, he and Howard got to be best friends. And so we always had to do Howard. And I just would shudder, at that, knowing that every industry person in L.A. is listening to Howard Stern, even though they hate him. They're listening, and they're hoping to God their name never comes up. And here's Sam, that basically gets drunk every show he's been on there. And it was tough. Yeah, I was there for most of it. Somebody had to take him back to the room.
Well,
and
I was going to say much later on, Jim Carrey sort of blamed Howard for exploiting it. Did you ever find it exploit? I don't know if the word exploitus is a word, but did you feel like it was being an exploiting type thing that Howard may have taken a little too much and really enjoyed seeing, a kind of a messed up Sam? I think Jim Carrey and Howard made up on that, but it was something that was said and made Howard a bit pissed off.
You talk about when Sam and Howard got upset with each other?
Well, I mean, there was that, but later on, Jim Carrey said that, Howard was exploiting Sam and having him come in drunk was, helping Howard's ratings, and it wasn't really helping Sam.
I love Jim Carrey. He's been a friend of mine, and I guess, I don't know if he was a Sam or not, but the first night that he was ever in L.A., he's a friend. I consider him a friend today. He's took vacations with us. He has been, when my mother's alive, he's been to my mother's house in Tulsa and stayed, and good friends and everything. Jim says things that baffle me sometimes. That's one of them. I heard that, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? They were friends. I mean, if Howard would have been on a 5,000-watt station, Sam still would have done this. They were friends. I don't think either one of them exploited each other. Sam went on to promote whatever he was doing. A lot of times he just went on just to be with Howard. And Howard has Sam on because the ratings, and it was great radio. So, no, I don't think either one of them exploited each other. I think maybe Jim, a little afraid to go on Howard himself and everything. I think, Jim's a very insecure person. And I think his insecurity kind of comes out when it starts talking about things like that.
Well, you did mention the feud Howard and Sam had there for a little bit, which was great radio once again. Tell me a little bit about that time, because it was involved John Bon Jovi and he was jealous a little bit. Tell me just your thoughts when this was happening.
Well, I can tell you exactly what happened. I was there. Sam played Giant Stadium with Bon Jovi, Skid Row. I forget who all was there, but Sam was the main attraction. 83,000 people with a microphone, if you can imagine that. We knew John. We knew the whole band and everything else. Well, Richie Sambora was dating Cher at the time. So after the show was over, he invited, different ones to come down and a party down at his house with Cher and everything. So we all went over there. And Sam had talked to John and the band, and their riff with Howard's riff with them was Howard felt like he had broke them. And he probably did. Now they go to another radio station to promote their album instead of his. And so they got this falling out. So Sam's Mr. Peacemaker. So he's talking to John and Richie and the rest of them, and he's going, come on, man. Yeah, you and Howard go way back, and let's go in the morning and patch it up. And so they agree. They'll go in with Sam in the morning. So he calls Howard. He said, hey, brother, I got Bon Jovi and everything. We're going to be coming in the morning. They want to make peace with you. Well, Howard, his people get a hold of everybody. CNN, MTV, you name it. They're all there waiting for the big reunion of Howard and Bon Jovi. The problem is when it gets to be about 5 o'clock and we're down almost close to Atlantic City, I'm telling Sam and the rest of them said, hey, guys, we got to get in some limos. We got to go up there and do Howard's show. Well, then they go, we're not going. And so Sam's like, what the F are you talking about? I called Howard. No, we decided we're not going to go. When Sam's going, well, I can't show up. If you guys aren't going, I can't show up. He'll lynch me. And so none of them show up. But Howard blames Sam, thinking Sam set him up, that Bon Jovi never did tell him that they were going to go, but they did. Just at 5 o'clock in the morning, they changed their mind and decided not to go, and that's what the big rift was about.
What they made up, which was great. I think the other big moment on that show, well, there's many, but tell me about the time. Was he asleep, or he was supposed to come in, and Jessica Hahn was around, and was there a hotel room? Something happened where he didn't show up, right? And they called, and am I remembering this correctly, or?
You talk about for Howard's show?
Yeah, I thought there was.
Rivers show.
Maybe it was just maybe what it was. He missed the Joan show, right?
Yeah, he missed the Joan Rivers show.
Okay.
That came as close to ending his career as anything he had ever done. And we had done a show a night before. He had been clean. We did a show, and Sam comes in the next morning. Howard orders up some champagne and stuff. And so Sam gets ripped. So afterwards, he, goes, has some Chinese food, but he's done. Now, the call time was supposed to be at 5 o'clock. So that gives Sam plenty of time, to sleep a little bit, get his head together, and do the show. Except after we get back to the hotel, the Joan Rivers staff keeps moving it up. To 2 o'clock call time. Then it's a noon call time. So I tell them it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If you want to go back to what was originally scheduled, the 5 o'clock call time, we're fine. He's not going to be there in an hour. I'm going to tell you now. That is not going to happen. Well, Joan is going out and she's entertaining the crowd until they can get Sam there. Problem is, Sam is not going to get there. So she comes back off her show and calls me 3, 4, 5 times, where's Sam? And I go, Joan, I've told you, he's not going to make it. If you want to do the 5 o'clock, well, I got an audience here. I go, then you should have told us before now that you want a 12 o'clock call. And so I said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. She goes back out, entertains some more, comes back. Where's Sam? We go through this 4 or 5 times until I finally go, Joan, it's not going to happen. Well, I'm thinking, all right. Now, I always rented a extra room under nobody's name for Sam. First, if he meets somebody he likes, he can go there. But if he also just wants to be away from everybody, nobody knows how to get a hold of him, that's fine. Well, I go up and I get Sam moved from this suite to this room. I go back to my room and I'm thinking, all right, I can relax, go get a lunch or whatever. And because we still got to do David Letterman that night. So I go downstairs. There is Joan at the office with her entire crew, her film crew. And I'm thinking, oh, God. So I go back up to where Sam's room is just to make sure they don't find out where he's at. Well, we have this idiot security guy, and Joan knows me very well, by the way. She knows what I look like. She's talked to me many times. Her and my mother have went shopping. So she knows who I am. She puts this security guy that hardly speaks English on camera as me. And why did Sam miss the show? He had a bad Chinese food. He's sick. He had bad Chinese food. And then I see it later on, and then I'm like, what the hell is going on? Well, we don't make the show, obviously. Now I can't have Sam show up at David Letterman since he missed Joan Rivers, because I don't know what she'll do. And so I called David, and David totally understands. That's cool, brother. We'll schedule another time. So I said, all right. Well, it hits the fan. And we're getting ready. That next week, we're getting ready to film Charlie Hoover, which is a sitcom starring Sam and Tim Matheson. That was really a fill-in, and it did go for 10 shows as a fill-in. And now I got Fox is wanting to drop him. He's a presenter on the Grammys. They drop him. American Music Awards. They drop him. I mean, all because he doesn't make the Joan Rivers show. So I remember Peter Chernoff calls me from Fox. And he goes, why did he miss the Joan Rivers show? And I said, well, they changed the call time, and so he wasn't prepared to make it. And so he starts going, well, we're reconsidering the Charlie Hoover project. And so I said, all right, it starts on Thursday. And I said, all right, that's all right. Sam will be there in costume, ready to go on Thursday. If you pull the plug, just write me a check for $480,000 because we have a contract. Nowhere in a contract does it say he has to show up for Joan Rivers show. And then I remember I told him, I said, Peter, kind of refresh my memory. Didn't you fire this bitch? And he goes, yeah. And I go, and now she's running your network? And he goes, she's not running my network. I said, well, it sounds like to me she is. She makes a phone call because he didn't show up to her over 65 geriatric crowd. And you're gonna try to put him out of business? So I said, it's up to you. I can't talk you into that. So you do what you want to do. And then I go to work on trying to talk to Walter Miller on the Grammys, and they put him back as a presenter and stuff. And Walter's going, I'm sticking my neck out, man. You better deliver. And I go, well, I think my neck's out on the line further than yours, Walter, but he'll be there and ready to go. So I'd end up getting basically everything back. And we end up, long story short, we end up doing Charlie Hoover, and everything's fine. He does a makeup show for Joan Rivers at our expense. And the funny thing about that is he's drunk off his ass while he's there. So it was never boring with Sam.
Well, as I listen to you, I have all these thoughts. I think, okay, this sounds fun, terrible, exhilarating, all these things as being the manager. And what I also think is he is making his shots. He's doing the appearances. So you're getting him to the spot. And that I would assume he, in his mind, thinks, this is how I make my money. This is how I work. If I don't have a little hit of this or a drink of that, this is not going to work. I assume that's sort of how your mind was at the same time as well, right? Because I think anybody would say, well, you have to settle him down. But then if you settle him down, there's really no career. There's no no one wants to see Sam Kinnison just kind of stand up there and sing. Because when he did sing, it was fun, but then he would scream. And then, right? Am I getting this whole dynamic correct?
Well, you probably got the part right on Sam. For me, I end up with shingles, end up in a divorce. We got remarried, my beautiful wife, Sherry. And I took care of the business. I never did party. I was never a partier. I just never was. And it was difficult taking care of a business with Sam when he's supposed to show up for a meeting or something and never shows up. one thing I garnered is that I garnered a great deal of respect in the business, even to this day, of managing Sam and actually bringing him back when he hit bottom. And but for Sam lived for today. Sam always said that he would never see 40, and he ended up being correct. He died at 38. But he lived for today, and we had, I can't say talks, we had more of arguments about that. He believed that the ends justifies the means, that it takes everything you go through to get to where you're at. So he needed everything you went through to be on top. And I'm going, yeah, well, BS. You know, I'm the one that's working my ass off here to get you to the top and to keep you there. And you're just partying. So don't give me this means justifies the ends. But he really felt that way. And so no matter what he did, that was all right, because it takes that. You know, if he partied, and he used to tell me, man, if I come up with one routine, it's worth it. And so after he'd be on a 3-day party, I'd go, well, did you come up with any routines and stuff? And but that was his thinking process. But it was stressful. I enjoyed our first 40-city tour probably more than anything. I mean, for one thing, Sam had been a loser his whole life, and to see him extremely successful, I raised him. I raised my 3 brothers. They were like my sons more than they was like my brothers. And so if you can imagine having a child that you really think you're going to be taken care of the rest of your life, and then you see them find their niche in life and what they're probably supposed to be doing and be very successful at it. That's how I felt with Sam. But it was still very, very stressful. Like I said, I did 5 months in a rehab, and I didn't even drink. And so sometimes it was tough.
I hope you have a couple more minutes, because I want to.
How much time you want, brother?
I was, again, watching a lot of things before this, and so I watched people tell stories, Jeff Garlin, old comedians, just telling stories about Sam. But Joe Rogan mentioned this, and as he said it, I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Joe's kind of a guy that people really respect, and he said, you know, the man changed comedy. He really did. And as I think back, you know, Richard Pryor changed comedy. George Carlin changed comedy. Sam Kinnison changed comedy. I mean, there was no one doing what Sam was doing. And then it became, you could be foul-mouthed. You could, I mean, really get after it. You could really tell some stories from the road. What a legacy, right? I mean, that's got to be great. And for me to think, as you can go back to watch YouTube, there's been documentaries. You wrote a great book. It's just great to know that this, you know, this happened in 1992. We lost Sam. And we're 30 years later still kind of just reminiscing about him. That has to make you feel good.
It amazes me. Next year will be 30 years. And he has I describe it as a cult following of millions of people that every year on the anniversary of his death, every year I go, I'm not gonna post anything. It's been, you know, this year was 29 years. I'm not gonna post anything. And then it's so many there that I feel compelled. I've got to say something. And when I do, like this year I did, we must have had 3,000 comments just on a Facebook post. And I do feel like that Sam changed comedy. I remember Dice Clay was promoting on the Arsenio Hall show. He was promoting Ford Fairlane movie, his first movie I think he's coming out with. And on there, you know, typical Dice style, he was going to win a Grammy. I mean, I win an Oscar for it. He'll go down as the greatest actor to ever perform, and he's the greatest stand-up comedian that has ever lived. And I'm watching it at my house. Sam's watching it at his house. He calls me right in the middle of it. Said, tell Arsenio I'll come on next week. Well, Arsenio and him had been on the outs. They'd actually gotten a short fist fight. And so they'd been on the outs. I called Arsenio and I said, hey, we've been watching we watched Dice on your show tonight. Sam wants to come on next week. Arsenio goes, yeah, man. Great. And we were good friends. He was also son of a preacher in Cleveland. And said, great, we'll do it next week. Well, Sam comes on, and where it all originated was I had come up with this idea. Sam and Dice really didn't like each other. That wasn't an act. They really didn't like each other. And but I'm always thinking about business. So I'm thinking, why don't we put them out on tour together? Make it like WWF. They're never at the venue at the same time. They don't do an interview together because I didn't know what would happen if they did. Wherever the one is the strongest, which I felt like Sam was the strongest anywhere, but wherever, East Coast will have Dice come on last and get out in the Midwest and West, we'll have Sam come on last. And so I had projected on a 12-city tour. I had projected that they would each make roughly about $7 million each. And so first I got to sell Sam on it, which was no easy pitch. But I finally sell Sam on it. He's at my house, so I said, well, you're going to have to talk to Dice. And he goes, we'll see. So he's sitting there, and I call Dice. And I had to tell him about it. And so Dice is like, is Sam there? I said, yeah. I said, well, let's talk. Him and I need to talk. So we get on there. Well, Dice had been good friends with our younger brother, Kevin, that was murdered. And so it starts off with, man, I tried to come up to you at the forum and tell you how bad I felt about Kevin, and you blew me off. Well, Sam goes, well, man, I was driving on Sunset and I pulled up next to you and you blew me off. Then it got into the routines, hey, man, Sam, tell him what Dice did, but that's my opinion. You stole some of my routines. They start going over the routines, and Dice is going, I was doing that in 83, and Sam goes, I was doing it in 78. And so this is not going well. So after they get through yelling at each other and everything, give me back the phone. And so I go, Dice, I said, talk it over with your dad, because everybody knew that Dice's dad, had great influence and basically made most of the decisions for Dice. And I said, talk it over with your dad. I mean, you guys don't have to be buddies. You can tell the media how you feel about each other, everything else. Let's just fill some arenas and make some money. And so he goes, okay, I'll talk to my dad, and I'll call you back. Well, he never did call me back. First time I hear anything about it is on the Arsenio Hall show. And Arsenio brings up, which he had to get from Dice because I hadn't talked to anyone, and I'm sure Sam didn't. He brings up that, hey, I heard you and Sam Kinnison maybe going to work together. And so Dice goes, yeah, he called me and wanted to open for me. But I told him I work alone and everything. Well, none of that was true. None of that. And so now Sam comes on the next week. And he comes out there, and it also had come out that Dice was not Italian, that his real name was Silverstein.
Remember that. Andrew
Silverstein. And this is the first time he's getting up and acknowledging that. Not that I think it would have made any difference, except he had pushed himself off as Italian. And so he gets up, and I don't know if you ever seen the episode or anything, it's on YouTube, but he gets up and he steps over to the front of the stage and is almost crying, let me tell you who Andrew Dice Silverstein really is. He's a guy that came out to L.A. and busted his ass. And he's almost crying. Sam comes out the next week. And so Arsenio is asking him questions. He asked him about Dice. So Sam gets up and goes to the very spot that Dice did. And goes, let me tell you who Andrew Dice Silverstein really is. He's a guy that came to L.A., stole my routines, Fonzie's jacket and Stallone's attitude. Yeah. He goes back and sits down. I think, well, okay, I guess that project is probably dead. And but he makes a statement there. The reason I said all this is a statement he made. And Arsenio brings up that Dice said he's the best stand-up comedian ever in history. And so he asked Sam what he thought about it. And Sam just made a genius statement, I thought. He said, comedy is like a rainbow. And if you're really good and you're really lucky, you get to be a shade in that rainbow. There is no best. There's no greatest. You get to be a shade in the comedy rainbow. And I just thought, man, that was just the greatest statement I'd ever heard about, who's the greatest comedians. And Richard Pryor was Sam's influence. And an interesting thing is that Richard and Sam and I all grew up in the same projects in Peoria, Illinois, but we didn't know each other until Sam had made it. But when Sam was on his honeymoon with his first wife, they went to the Comedy Store to see a show on their honeymoon. And they sat right down front, and Richard Pryor was on stage. And Sam is just enamored with him. Sam comes back off his honeymoon, and we're together, and he tells me, they went out to Hollywood, and he went to the Comedy Store, and he sat down on stage. Now, he's still a preacher. And he said, and I was sitting there thinking, I could do that. I could do that. But he doesn't get out of the ministry for another 3 years. But I think that kind of, Richard put that spark in him that he wanted to be a comedian, and he could do that. I think that's where that all started.
Yeah, I love the Peoria, Illinois. Well, St. Louis, Missouri is where I am from, so it's 3 hours up north. I've been to Peoria many times, and I really do think.
Where are you from?
St. Louis, Missouri. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Been there many times.
So anytime I've been to Peoria 5, 6. Anytime I think about it, I think, man, Richard Pryor grew up here, and then I really had no idea. I always thought you, Sam, and the whole family were Texans, but I realized there's a lot of Peoria, Illinois, in you guys.
We grew up in Illinois, Peoria, Illinois.
Couple more questions. I have to ask you about the bad, the awful night in April of '92. I had always thought that he had sort of kind of cleaned up, right? I mean, he got married 5 days before. Things were going well, right? Like he was doing well. Tell me about just that last couple months there, because it seemed like things were going well. You were in the van, I guess, behind Sam's car. Just tell me a little bit about that night. And I mean, you've told the story a million times, but I think it's good to hear the final thoughts of Sam as he was talking to someone, right? And it's just an amazing story. If you don't mind sharing that with me a little bit about how he was doing well, and just those thoughts he was having at the very end of his life.
Sam had been clean for a year and a half. And when I make that motion, what I mean is that he partied every night for 12 years, every night. The last year and a half of his life, he cleaned up. He had hit rock bottom. He had $300. I was going to quit. And for the first time, he told me, he said, I got a problem. I said, all right, well, we can't take you off the road. You have to make money. But I said, there's a place called the Log Cabin out in Malibu. You give up your apartment in L.A., you live in your house in Malibu, and every morning that we're in town, you're in their AA meeting. It's celebrities only. You're in that AA meeting. If you miss one, I quit. And so he did. I said, I don't, if you're out of it, you still show up. If you've been up all night, you still show up. And he did. He did. And he met a lot of comedians. I mean, a lot of celebrities there. Ozzy Osbourne and him became good friends from that meeting. And so he was, when I say basically clean, for the last year and a half, maybe once out of every 3 or 4 nights, maybe one night, he'd party for one night. And that would be it. So when I say clean for the last year and a half, Sam used to get up on stage and tell everybody, I've been clean for 81 days or whatever it would be. I remember 81 days. And the crowd would just go nuts. Yeah. And then he'd go, well, not all in a row. And
I remember that. I do.
And everything. And so he had cleaned up. And then it got around about Christmas time. I started noticing different things. We did a show actually in Austin, Texas, which I live in San Antonio now. And just up the road here, we did a show in Austin, Texas. And the next morning we had to catch a 6:00 flight in the morning, or he's going to have to charter a plane. And so I remember I got up, I went up to a suite, and he was up, and he's crying. He hadn't been drinking or anything. He's very emotional. And I asked him what was going on. And I have a daughter named Ginger. And Sam just loved her. He just loved her. And so what's going on? And he goes, no, man, I've just been thinking. And I go, what are you thinking about making you so emotional? And he goes, I don't have a Ginger. So I'm like, okay. Usually only one to a person here. What are you talking about? And he goes, man, you got something to live for. You got Ginger. I don't have a Ginger. And so I didn't know what to tell him and everything. And so I'm like, well, dude, we gotta get in this limo. We got to get home, or you're not going to make it for Christmas because there's no other flights. And he goes, no, just said, you go ahead and go on and leave the security guy with me, and we'll manage to get there. And somehow he did. I don't know, but he managed to fly in later. And so that was the first thing. And then just before his wedding and stuff, we had a meeting. I had a deal set. All we had to do was wrap it up with New Line Cinema, a 3-movie deal. One with Arnold Schwarzenegger, one with Rick Moranis, and then an in-concert movie. And so they wanted to meet Sam, as they always do. And so we're in this big conference room, and there's, I don't know, probably a half dozen of them and myself and our attorney and Sam. In the middle of it, he just gets up and goes, you know what? It sounds good to me if you all can work it out with my brother. We're in business, and leaves. So they're, after he leaves, they're like, Bill, is he cool with this? Does he want to do this? And I thought, yeah. He's just, we've been working our ass off and stuff. He's, he's really tired. But I'm mystified by it. And the other thing is, if Sam ever needed an excuse to party, this was going to be it. And so I remember on the way home, I called him, and so I go, Sam, what the hell just happened in there? And he said, well, I was sitting there and I was thinking that I've attained every goal that I set when I got into show business. And I was thinking I got to set some new goals. And so I said, so you get up and walk out in the middle of a meeting because you got to set some new goals. And he goes, well, yeah, you take care of the business. You're going to know if we get a good deal or not and everything else. So I thought, there's no need for me to set her anymore. But I thought that was really unusual. And then there's a few other things. But on that particular day, he had got married. They went over to Hawaii. And they flew back, took a red eye back. They're supposed to get on a plane, fly to Vegas. Laughlin would have a limo waiting and would bring him down to Laughlin. I rented a van, and I had the opening act and the security guy with me, and I rented the van because I want to come home after the show on Sunday. I don't want to wait around till Monday because it's only 240 miles. I wanted to come home. And, well, I get a call. First, it's from his wife, and she's not happy. And so she's telling me different stuff. And so I go, where's Sam at? She goes, he's here. So Sam gets on there, and so I go, hey, brother, what's going on? And he goes, man, we've been together 7 years, and we get married, and she thinks everything changes. But it's not. It's still just like it was for 7 years. And he said, don't worry about her. I'll take care of what's the plan. So I told him, you get on this plane. It was a charter over, and I'll meet you at Laughlin. And then I explained to him that while he had been on his vacation, because I hadn't been able to talk to him, that I'd wrapped up the 3-movie deal. We also wrapped up his own television sitcom on Fox called the Sam Kinnison Family Entertainment Hour, which was really kind of like the old Jackie Gleason variety show, not the Honeymooners, but the variety show. Also, I had wrapped up a new 3-year deal with I can't think of the big hotel now. They're in Las Vegas. And so this was our last casino town to get a deal in. And the reason we were going there, Sam picked up some chump change, and I'll sign the contracts, and we have a 3-year deal there, which would wrap up all of our casino towns. Our plan was to do movies, do television, do maybe a 12-city tour in the summer, and play the casinos, because they were the easiest things in the world to play. You go upstairs, you come down, you do a show for 40 minutes, because they want them back out on the floor. You go back upstairs, and you do whatever you want to do. Easiest gig in the world for a lot of money. So he tells me that he's changed his mind. He wants to drive. So I said, all right. Then I said, we'll meet in Barstow at this McDonald's. It's like a train. And so we did. We met there. Then we talked over some stuff. And then he told me he was going to go back in the ministry in May. And this was April the 2nd. And my parents had a big convention in their church every May in Tulsa. And he said, I'm going to go back in the ministry. And so I go, Sam, this isn't something you can F around with. We have a brother, Richard, that's still in the ministry. Mom and dad are pastoring in Tulsa. This isn't something. They said, no, man, I'm going to go back to preaching. He said, I wasn't any good the first time. But he said, I think now I know how to handle a crowd. I know how to work a stage and everything. I think I could really do well. So I said, okay. Then when we get through with all this, we'll talk about it. And so got in our vehicles. He was driving his special edition Trans Am. And we're driving over there. Well, the last exit before we get to River Road, which is a 2-lane road that goes up to Laughlin, I don't even know if it's still there now. But it's about 25 miles to Laughlin. He has to get gas, so we pull off. And so we're getting, he's getting gas. I got plenty of gas, but he's getting gas. And so we start talking. I told him, I said, I think I'm going to get rid of our booking agent, get another booking agent. So I think we've used up this guy's contacts. And so it's like, dude, we've only had him for a few months. And I go, it's the most expendable part of the business. Don't worry. And he goes, well, you know what you're doing. And so to make him feel better, I said, Robin Williams one time, he fired 3 booking agents in 1 month. So I said, but I think it'd be better for us to get some new contacts. So he says, all right. Then he gets to talking, and so then all of a sudden he goes, have the guys empty out my car. And I'm going, we're 25 miles from Laughlin. Well, yeah, I want everything taken out. I want everything taken out, put it in the van. So I said, all right. So I tell him, get everything out of the car and put it in the van. He had this dog that was totally untrained called Russo. And Sam never went anywhere without this frickin' dog. Totally untrained. And so he said, take Russo. So I'm like, why are we taking the dog? So I don't want him in the car. I want him to get in the van. So I said, all right. And so then when we get through and we got in our vehicles, he pulled out in front of me, which he never ever did. He always followed me. He pulled out in front of me, and we got on River Road. He went 3.2 miles and was hit head on by this kid in a pickup. And I slid the van, which I have to explain. We could see a pickup, on up the road because of kind of a little climb for us, not much, but a little bit. It's dusk. We could see this pickup passing all these cars in the other lane. And so I'm talking to Sam, but he obviously can't hear me. But I'm going, Sam, watch out for this guy. Watch out for this guy. Let him get back in line. Slow down. And Sam's like he's hearing me. He slows down to about 15 miles an hour. At the last second, this pickup gets back in line. What we didn't see was there was his buddy in another pickup behind him that were passing the same cars. And so we had just a fraction of a second of relief. Whew! And bam, there's the other pickup. They hit head on, and it was no contest for Sam, but I slid the van next to the door. The security guy gets out of the van, runs right there to the car, which is just a few feet away, and he can't get the door open. So I guess the adrenaline in me, I jerked the door open, and Sam is sitting in the seat. He's leaning over on the armrest. The steering wheel is gone. I can see he's hit his head on the windshield, but he's only got 4 little scratches, look like with somebody's fingernails on his forehead, and that's it. So, but I know he's hurt. I don't know none of us knew he was dying. And so I jerk open the door, and he's sitting there, and he starts telling me why. Why now? And I'm telling him, Sam, just lay still. We got help on the way, but I don't know if we do because I haven't been able to get any service on my phone. So I grabbed his phone, and I'm going, just lay still. We got help on the way. Don't move. Just stay here. And he just keeps telling me, why? Why now? Why now, brother? And so I said, let me check on everybody. I'll be right back, but you stay right here. And so I go around the other side, and Malika is passed out. And but it seems like her pulse is strong. And so I go to this kid, and because people were saying there's gas all over the ground there, and he can't get out of his truck. He's got a kid with him. So I jerk the door open, and he's a football player, he's a pretty good sized guy. So he gets out of the truck, and he goes around to the front of the truck and goes, oh, look what he did to my effing truck, man. So I grab him by the collar, and I go, hey, come here. So I pull him down, and I said, I want you to look at this guy because you're probably going to be working for him the rest of your life. Now, take your ass over here and sit down on the side of the road. So he does. Well, I go to Sam, and he's been scooting to get out of this car. Well, he weighs 280 pounds. And so he gets to the edge, and I realize we can't keep him in the car. So so myself and a couple of the bystanders, we lift him down out of the car, and we just lay him right there on the highway. Now his opening act, which used to be his best friend, he has a little different story than I do. And when I ask him about it, he goes, well, we have different memories. Well, mine are ingrained in me the rest of my life. But anyway, we lay him there. No one is holding him because I'm afraid that if he's got, injuries to his spine or his neck or something, we could paralyze him. So we just lay him there. And I'm standing there, and I've got both of his phones, and on my phone and his phone, I'm calling 911. I can't get any response. First thing that catches my eye is this dog that ordinarily would be gone. All the doors open on this van. He's got his rear paws on the seat, his front paws on the dash, and he's looking out looks like over Sam's head, and he's just looking. And I'm thinking, that's weird. Well, then Sam all of a sudden starts saying, I don't want to die. And, but it's not like he's afraid. It's like he's trying to negotiate with someone. Someone, tell him it's time for you to go or something. He goes, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And before any of us can respond, all of a sudden he just goes, okay. And that was it. He was gone. So I asked if anyone else knew CPR. And so this kid said he did. I said, okay, come over and give him compressions, and I'll give him mouth to mouth. But I couldn't even get the phlegm out of his mouth to give him mouth to mouth. He was gone. Now, the opening act, his story, he was holding Sam and was talking to him. The truth of the matter is, him and the security guy were down the road about 30 feet. The security guy had tore off the sleeves off of his shirt, made a bandana, and they're just freaking out. And so I tell them, I go down there and I put an arm around each of them, and I go, hey, guys, I want you to do something. I want you to clean out everything in Sam's car. And the police are there. The paramedics are there, but the paramedics have pretty much, without ever telling me, let me know, he's gone. And so I want everything, every little thing that's in that car, I want it out of there. Because once it got to the tow yard, I figured somebody's going to go through it and have mementos of Sam's. And so they did. And that was the real story of what went on at the highway. Never got up and walked around. The only conversations he had was what I told you. And that was the way it was. And it's weird how that, I know he's gone. The paramedic that's working on him, I'd got down on one knee and he's working on the other. And they've stuck that thing down his throat. He's trying to do whatever. And so I remember looking at him and going, are we doing any good? And he just looked at me, didn't shake his head, yes, no, didn't say anything. He just looked at me. And I knew with that look that he was gone. I get to the hospital, and I've got the coroner and the head of the hospital there. I rode in the ambulance with Malika behind Sam. And we get there, and I come in, and I remember the coroner telling me, we need you to sign some papers. And I said, I'm not signing anything until I know how my brother is. Brad, I know he's dead. But somehow that is not translating from my heart to my head. It's not translating. And so he goes, well, we declared him expired at, I think it was 7:32. And so I said, okay, what happened to him? And he said, well, we won't know until we have an autopsy, but I think he probably has a broken neck and everything. Then they were really, really generous. And, the president's telling me, my office is your office as long as you need it. Take care of whatever business you want and everything else. Well, my next call is to my wife. We have a community theater here, and we're doing, oh, man. I can't remember the play now, but there's a line in it. My daughter's playing Little June in it. And there's a line in it that says, I want to dedicate this show to my Uncle Sam, talking about, the United States. Uncle Sam. At that moment, well, first I called Sherry, and for the first time in my life, I'm stuttering. I can't hardly get the words out. And I'm trying to tell her, that Sam, we've been in an accident and Sam's dead. While I'm talking to her, all the electricity goes out in the theater at the very moment that my daughter goes, ladies and gentlemen, I dedicate this song or this show to my Uncle Sam. And all the lights go out. Then they come back on. And so there was just a lot of weird stuff, Brad. I'm not into that weird stuff, but there were strange things that happened that kind of, I think Sam had a premonition something was going to happen to him, and it did.
Well, it feels oddly peaceful, I have to say, and I appreciate you recollecting that story. I'm curious, you mentioned the stand-up comedian with him was Carl LaBove. Did you ever get a chance to make up with him? He has just recently passed with cancer. Did you ever have a chance to sort of have any sort of reconciliation at all with him?
Carl was Sam's best friend. They made a deal down in Houston that whoever made it first would help the other one. And Sam was a very loyal guy. They had a situation that happened that I won't go into about 3 months before Sam died that destroyed that friendship. Sam literally wanted to just whip him. And he took off up north to a little town, I can't remember it, and basically was hiding out, afraid Sam was gonna beat him to death. And so that friendship was dissolved. On this particular trip, the reason he was there is he called me and told me I'm out of money, and would Sam let me go to Laughlin? And so I said, hey, dude, I'll ask him, but I mean, that's you and his deal. So I call Sam and I tell him, said, hey, just got a call from Carl, and he wants to, he's out of money, and he wants to know if he can open for you in Laughlin. Well, Sam paid him good money. Sam paid him $5,000 a show and expenses. And so Sam, in language I won't use, lets me know, no, he's not going. So I said, hey, that's up to you, dude. I'm just asking you because he called and asked me. I don't care if you take him or you don't take him. It's irrelevant to me. So we hang up. Sam calls me right back. I mean, probably in 5 minutes, he calls me back and said, no, he can go. But here's the deal. We don't talk to each other. We don't see each other. He's never on stage with me. If I go downstairs and he's downstairs and sees me, he goes back upstairs. If I walk into a bar or into a restaurant and he's there, he leaves. That's the deal. So I called Carl and I said, I talked to Sam, here's the deal. So Carl goes, okay, well, that's why he was in the van with me, is that Sam didn't want to see him, didn't want to talk to him. Well, after Sam died, I didn't have any special allegiance to Carl. I mean, we were friends, but I mean, we weren't, brothers like him and Sam were. And so I thought, out of loyalty to Sam, I'll try to keep an eye on him. So I give him a car. I went on a golfing trip to Hawaii with a bunch of my friends from the club, and I paid for him to go. And I had season tickets at the Anaheim Ducks hockey, and I'd call him, and he would bring his girlfriend, and we would go to the hockey games. But the relationship was always, a little strange. And then I called him one day and I go, hey, do you want to go to the hockey game tonight? And he goes, yeah, we want to go, but you can't bring up Sam. And so I go, Carl, Sam is the only bond you and I have. We don't have any other bond other than Sam. And I'm not going out with anyone that Sam's name can't be mentioned. So just forget it. And he also would never do any projects that I was involved in. I produced 3 different documentaries. Every time they asked Carl to be part of it, be interviewed or whatever, no. When I wrote the book, I personally asked Carl, do you want to be involved in writing this book? No. And so he changed his name from Carl to C.D. LaBove, like nobody's going to know who he was. And he wanted to sever every identification he had with Carl. He wouldn't go on the Howard Stern show because Howard, he said, all he would want to do is talk about Sam. So the first and only time I know that he was on there was years later. And I get a call from Gary and Gary says, Carl's on the show. And I go, really? Because this has been 5-6 years. And he said, yeah. I said, man, he's saying some weird stuff. And I said, like what? And he said, well, he said that his daughter is actually Sam's daughter. Well, this girl is 16 years old at this point. And so he said, do you want to come on? I go, no, I don't want to come on. I don't want to be part of that. And so I somehow managed to get her phone number. And a day or two after that, I called her. And we talked, and I said, I guess you heard that Carl said you're Sam's daughter. And she said, yeah, I heard it on the radio. I said, and that's the first time that you've heard that or whatever? And she said, yeah. And so I was really upset with him. The last time he had seen her, she was 6 years old. We were playing Atlantic City, and his ex-wife called me and said, I think Carl should see his daughter. And so I made him go to this mall. I gave him a couple $100 to take her for a couple hours and buy her stuff. That's the last time he's seen her. He never paid a dime of child support. Unbeknownst to me, that up until Sam died, he paid the child support. So I think he knew, but I had no idea. And so I kept calling her and to be checking on her and everything. And when I eventually, trying to think, I remember where the real divide came as I was promoting something I had done on different radio stations. And I remember I was on a radio station in Chicago. Question came up. What's going on with you and Carl and the Kinnison family? So I don't know. Haven't heard anything that's going on. I said, yeah. I said, he was on here, man, and really trashing you. So I'm like, okay. All right. So we go on, finish, never comes up, we hang up. I remember I called Philadelphia, and I'm doing an interview there. Same thing comes up. So I told the guy, I said, hey, when you go to break, hang on, I want to talk to you. And so he does, and so I go, what is going on? Uh-oh.
We're good.
There you are. So what's going on, man? why am I getting all this stuff about problems with Carl and me? And he said, man, he was on here and he just trashing you. And I go, what's he saying? And he said, well, he was saying that you conspired with his ex-wife to hide this child. And I go, do you really think anybody cares if Sam had a daughter? I said, seriously. And he told me a few other, I don't even remember them now, but a few other things that, he was saying. So I called Carl. I go, hey, is there something you want to tell me? And so he goes, man, Sam destroyed every person's life that touched him. And I go, well, I don't know. I seem to be doing pretty well. I said, I can't help that I told you 2 years before he died to start booking gigs and stuff, because Sam first was going in a different direction of his career, and second with his partying and stuff. You never knew if he was going to pass. And so he was like, well, man, let's just let bygones be bygones. And I was like, whatever. And so then I don't remember, just 3 or 4 times it was let bygones be bygones. Well, last time I seen him, I did a wedding renewal in Las Vegas for a couple friends. And they're also friends with Carl. And they said, Carl's going to be there. I said, I don't care. Doesn't bother me at all. And so he was there. Well, this lady comes up when we're outside taking pictures and everything. She comes up and said, can I have a picture with you and Carl? And I go, no. And so, and I just walk away. Well, Sherry, my wife, comes up and she goes, Bill, that's Karen, which was Carl's sister-in-law. And I knew Larry and Karen. I really liked them. And but she didn't look like I remembered her. And so I went, Karen, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll take a picture with you and Carl. And so I took the pictures, and then he came over, same speech, man. I just want to let the past be past. And I go, Carl, I'm tired of the past being past. Every time you do this, is let the past be past. I said, you're just not my world anymore. And I don't care to have a relationship with you, anything else. And he said, well, I just want you to know, man, I'm in a really good place now. I've got things straightened out, and I'm really in a good place. And I said, well, I'm happy for you. But I said, I don't think we're ever going to have the relationship we had before. And I walked away. That was my last time I seen him. That's the last words that we actually spoke to each other. Now, just a matter of 2 or 3 months that I found out that he had terminal cancer. And so I didn't have his phone number. I called Karen, and I was having to come to Vegas to do my niece's funeral. And so I told Karen, I said, tell Carl if he would like, I would like to stop by and sit down and talk with him. And so it was weeks later, she finally called me back and said, I'm sorry that I didn't call you back. But Carl said that he wasn't feeling good and everything, but I think it really was, and looking back, I think the reason he never did any of the projects that we were involved in, but is because his stories were totally different than my reflections, not only out on the highway, on anything, and he could not say those kind of things if I'm there, because he knew that I would call him on it. And so I felt bad for the family. That's a rough way to go. I felt bad that he went through that, but he didn't care to be my friend, and in my heart, I forgave him, but I just didn't want to be in that position again. Then I saw people were sending me interviews he had done in the last few months just before he's dying. And so one of them is what I told you had happened out on the highway that day. And somehow he had turned that completely around, and everything that I did, he did. And I guess I was nowhere around. And that really ticked me off, Brad. That really ticked me off. I'm thinking, man, Sam's been gone for 29 years. He paid this guy thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. He paid his rent so he could live next door to him in Malibu on the beach. He bought him new cars. They had these scenes, and out of it, I did, and I was the one, by the way, that took the DNA test for the girl that she is Sam's daughter. I wasn't trying to hide it. At first, I thought if she is, she needs to know. And but I'm thinking, for 29 years, he couldn't let Sam rest for 29 years. That's why I went. Before I would never, whatever his story was, I'd be, yeah, that's okay. Then after that, I was like, no, and I'm not covering up. If he can hold that for 29 years, then no.
Well, I guess he, in his final days, he was, as the comedians do, they took another person's joke or another person's story. That's what they do.
But it wasn't even him taking my story. It was just that it all of a sudden, and it wasn't just that interview. It was like, well, now I understood, because I could never understand why he would never be in any projects where he would get some publicity. And then all of a sudden it was like, bam, this has been there the whole time. Why didn't I ever see that? The reason was he didn't want me to be there to go, no. Like I said, there was one time that I asked him about, his story about what happened on the highway. And I go, Carl, that's not what happened. Why are you saying that? And he said, well, we all have different memories. And I go, well, I think my memories are pretty exact. That happened to be my brother. And I can, talking to you today, over 29 years later, I can tell you in detail. I can tell you about the little farmhouse off on the side of the road. I can tell you I still remember exactly how the gravel and everything looked on that road. That was one of those things I'll never, forget the rest of my life. Yeah. And so, anyway, life goes on for some of us.
I gotta say, though, I've really enjoyed this. Just thinking about Sam and you living with him and just these stories. Hopefully, it was cathartic a little bit, maybe to have some conversations. But Bill, I really appreciate this. I know people can go watch you do your thing on Sundays. We went long, but I hope people really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. Anything else you'd like me to add before we say goodbye to everybody today?
No, you've been fantastic. I think I probably talked a little too much. You didn't get to say much, but I've enjoyed it. And anytime you would like me to come on, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that I have a million.
And I don't say that with all interviews, by the way.
Well, I appreciate that. And I have a million more questions as always, but we'll see. Maybe we'll do this again in 6 months. But no, people want to hear you, Bill, not me. So I appreciate that. But I thank Bill for joining me today here on Here's the Pitch. Again, sponsored by Masses Restaurants in St. Louis. 5 locations, stlmasses.com. We'll see you next time.